welcome to my cider shed. I'd like to show you how I got this all started. So I started making cider for friends out of a demijohn like this. So you have the airlock here, you have the apple juice that sits in here. Add some yeast and the yeast will eat the sugar in the apple juice, and as it ferments it will produce CO2 and alcohol. CO2 then goes through the airlock and allows it to belch out the CO2. Then as the yeast finishes off eating the sugar, there's residual alcohol that's made and then turns the apple juice into cider. Minds Eye Brewing Co is a rewarding venture. It started as a hobby. So I was fermenting cider out of this bucket. Similar concepts to the demijohn, where you have a little valve here that lets CO2 escape, but nothing can get in and contaminate the cider. So initially I was fermenting for friends and giving it away as presents and things. And then my friends came back and said, you know what, I want to have some more and I wouldn't mind paying for it. So I charged a few quid a bottle. And then before you know it, I was making a few buckets loads. And then I thought, well, maybe I could turn this into a business. So I did a forecast of the costs, looked into the Prince's Trust, now called the King's Trust, and they gave me a grant of £2,000 to help support the growth of my business. And so that went towards the costs of mainly this shed. That set me back about £1,200. So the startup costs altogether, with all the equipment, come into about £6,000, and I can make that back in about 2 years if I have one market stall every month, bringing in a gross revenue of about £400 a market. I can make maybe between £4,000 and £5,000 a year in gross from one market a month. So here's Presswood's Best. We make this in Presswood using apples from Andelo's farm. It's a mixture of British heritage apple varieties. It's a 330ml bottle. We're selling out at markets. It's our best selling cider at the moment. This is Eden's Gold. It's a dry cider, fermented over 6 months and then bottle conditioned for a further 6 months. We have a supplier in Southampton, a retired GP who's been making cider for 40 years. It's one of our best selling ciders. It's fermented using 3 British heritage apple varieties, Kingston Black, Dabonet and Harry Masters Jersey. They're really good varieties of apples for fermenting and turning into cider. It's in a champagne style bottle, so we market it like that, and it's quite attractive and aesthetically pleasing, we think. So this is our medium cider. It's St George's cider, fermented in Devon, produced by Simon Mower, who's been making cider for 10 years. We've recently started to work with him and his company. They're new to cider making, but we think they produce something that's very delicious. My favourite is Eden's Gold, because Stephen Hayes is a really, really good cider maker, as he's been making it for 40 years. So we think he's got it down to a T. Really, really good cider, especially if you're more favouring the drier ciders. I have an online shop which I need to update. We're running out of Eden's Gold. We're going to replenish that stock soon. So yeah, I think it will eventually become a viable, profitable business. The biggest challenge has been the reliability of making drinkable cider. It's easy to drink but hard to make. I will steal from Jeremy Clarkson and his Hawkston, because it's very true. Being a brewer or a fermenter of cider or wine, it's very tricky to get repeatable products, because cider is a fruit-derived alcoholic beverage. It's much like a wine, so every year is going to be different depending on how much sun and water the apples have had, how the summer's been. If it's been quite a dry summer, you're going to get a lot more sugars in the apples, but you won't get as much of a juice yield. But if it's been quite a wet summer, then you'll have more of a glut of apples, but the quality of the sweetness and the flavor profiles of the apples will be different depending on how the weather's been that year. Basically, every year is different, much like a wine. If you want to start a cider business, I recommend starting with a demijohn or a bucket, and maybe a small bit of kit to process the apples, but don't expect to have perfect cider the first time you make it. I've often thrown away various amounts of apple cider batches as they've not come out as I'd expected, maybe a bit too bitter, maybe it's been contaminated in the process of cider making. I'd love to upscale production and be able to host more markets, because at the moment my supply isn't meeting the demand. So I'm looking at partnering with new suppliers and seeing how I can market their cider basically. I would stick to cider making if I could start again and not try to do wine. Wine is a higher skill threshold and barrier to entry to get into. I've got a batch of wine which is about 20% and I'm turning that into mulled wine for the Christmas markets that are coming up. So the wine didn't go to plan. It's not a drinkable wine, but it is a very drinkable mulled wine. So this is the biggest cost, the biggest expense of my cider business is the equipment. So we'll start off with a speedle mill. So the speedle mill here, you put the apples in. The speedle mill has a stainless steel blade, centrifugal blade, that chops up the apples. Then you collect the pomace in a bucket. The pomace is then pressed in the hydraulic press. The hydraulic press has a balloon in it that expands and puts 3.5 bars of pressure onto the pomace. The pomace is then juiced and the juice is collected. The juice then we put into a fermentation vessel. There's what people call blue oak barrels, which are food grade plastic barrels that won't degrade. That then you can sit there with an airlock on it and sit there for ideally minimum of 4 weeks, but I let it sit there for up to 6 months. In between this period you rack it, so you get rid of the sediments that collects at the bottom, and that will reduce the chance of imparting off flavours. And then as it progresses over the 6 months, you have less and less sediments. The cider will get clearer and clearer to the point where you can sample it and be like, yeah, I'm happy with that, and then bottle it. So when you come into bottling, this I've recently purchased, which will help us do the next bottling run with Stephen Hayes, a well-known cider maker in Southampton. This piece of equipment is also of German origin, like the speedle mill. This is from Vigo as well. So this gravity bottle filling machine can process a few hundred litres of cider an hour, so I think 300 litres an hour. The cider comes in at the top, bottle sits under there and fills up the bottle. Then you've got a bottle full of cider. There's also crown cappers that you can get that cap the cider. This is the main bulk cost of setting up a small cider business is the equipment and then storing it in the shed.
Thank you for watching this video. If you got this far, please consider subscribing. Thanks. Until next time.